about these guys and trying to compete and win and trying to develop, winning culture, a winning environment, and trying to, put ourselves in a position to win games night in and night out. So it was never, I know Arturis had mentioned, about evaluation, and I think he'll probably speak to that. But with the group that we were coaching, it was never like, hey, we're evaluating. It was like, hey, we've got to establish and develop a winning culture. And I think you have to start somewhere. And, we started right from the beginning, from day one, with this group on that.
Just how about you? Obviously, what I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of changes. And even though you haven't wanted to discuss it yet, I'm sure you're aware this will be your first NBA season where you didn't have a winning record. How do you look at that, going forward? And, how did you analyze that?
Yeah, I think, Sam, for me, I'm disappointed. I'll always look at, things that I could have done better in a unique year. I don't want to talk about the players and what they could have done better because we were all in this together. I think first and foremost, looking at myself is the most important thing for me. So, again, going through the COVID thing, there's things I can look back on and say, wow, we maybe could have handled or done things differently. It was new and unique for everyone. I think that, obviously the trade happened and, trying to go on the fly through shoot arounds and those kind of things. I really want to go back and evaluate other things I could have done differently with that. I think the guys tried as hard as they could, from a chemistry standpoint, and the chemistry was always very, very good. But certainly I think we changed stylistically because our team got certainly very heavy in the front court, and, we had good players. Daniel Tice brings a physicality and the toughness. Thad was really, I think, playing at a very, very high level, but, his role changed some, and him facilitating probably wasn't the same level early in the season. But, even before the trade deadline, Sam, like it wasn't like, we still had a losing record, and I appreciate and respect what Arturis and Mark have done to continually try to make the team better. But I'll always look at things that I could have done better, or how I could have done a better job to help the group. There was, I think, a lot of things that for us, to be honest with you, were really, really hard to overcome. And what was hard to overcome, in my opinion, was the amount of games that we gave away, and some games against maybe, it's the NBA. There's great players in every team, but, certainly teams that we really had, I think, opportunities to win that, we just didn't play at the level we needed to. And there was a level of inconsistency. And I think as a coach, you always look at that, how you can improve and build upon a more consistent, group. And I get a third of our team changed, and you're trying to build habits, and it's hard to build habits, but, under the circumstances, like I said, are there things that, I could have done better, to try to help the group. And I'll always evaluate it and look at it that like that. That will probably take me a little bit of time to watch film and self-reflect and do those kind of things. But, the things that, when you look at the end of the season, and I think you see, I don't know what we are, 2 or 3 games away from a play-in, or, we weren't far away. That's the disappointing part. The disappointing part was, I think, about so many games that, in my opinion, were really one that we found a way to give other teams opportunities to win those games. And inevitably, those number of games come back and, really kind of bite you. And then I think the other part of it too, and no disrespect to Cleveland, because they, at times dominated us 2 or the 3 times we played against them. I didn't think we played particularly well against Minnesota. When we played them, I think the one game I'd say that we really didn't play well and came from behind and won was Detroit at home earlier in the year. And I think over 72 games season, 82 game season, I think you're going to have games where, gosh, I wish we could have had that one back. That was one we let slip away, or geez, we just didn't play to the level we needed to. That happens, but not the number of games we had, and I think that, trying to, figure that piece out and trying to, evaluate that, will be something, I'll certainly internally look at a great deal.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Darnell, go ahead.
From a roster standpoint, Billy, moving forward, what would you like to see this team target to compete better? What kind of things or traits do you feel like this team could use moving forward?
You know what, Darnell, I really haven't really spoke to Arturis, even, going into when we found out in Brooklyn that, we were out of it. We haven't even talked about that. I'm anxious to talk to Arturis about that. I don't want to speculate or talk, about something that I really hadn't had a conversation with him about. I will say this, every day for me with these guys was phenomenal. It was the great group. And the one thing I really appreciated about the group was, I don't know if people know how hard it was for them to play every single day. Like the testing, having to come in and test and sit around and wait for 45 minutes before you can leave or before you can go on the court and practice, and, getting into hotels and, 3:00 in the morning and having to go down and wait in line and go get tested. These guys never complained. They never, ever were anything else but professional and worked hard at it. So I've got a strong affinity for these guys as people and, the way they conducted themselves professionally. It's hard for me to sit there and say, okay, like, what does our team need? I think Kobe grew a lot this year, based on where he was to start the year to the end. But I also think that, Patrick grew in some ways. I think, Larry went through a lot this season with playing really well to start the year, hurting his shoulder, trade deadline changes. I think everybody kind of went through, an adjustment period at one point or another. I think about Sato going through the COVID, Zach going through the COVID, Vooch coming in after the trade deadline, trying to find his way. There was just a lot of, interesting things that, we all had to handle, and they all handled it great. But I don't know what our team will look like contractually. There's a lot of guys' contracts that are up. What does our team look like? I think Arturis and Mark and I will sit down and we'll evaluate that and talk about that. I look forward to that. But I haven't really given maybe that a whole lot of thought, at this point in time, as much as it's been, just trying to go game by game to, get ready for the next one, so to speak, and trying to give ourselves the best opportunity to maybe find a way to get into the play-in situation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
KC, go ahead.
Billy, this will obviously ultimately be a managerial decision, but you did talk about, the partnership aspect that appealed to you when you took the job. So if management asks you for your opinion on Thad Young, who's got a partial guarantee for next season, what will you say?
Yeah, I think the thing for me, Casey, and I would say this, and I'm being as honest as I can, there's a financial component to all this stuff that I am not well equipped at. Thad Young was awesome all year long. He was great. I look at his leadership in the locker room. I have basically spoke about this all year long with him. I mean, even when the trade happened and his role changed, even what he did tonight, here's a guy that's been in the league for 14 years. It's the last game of the year. People would say, oh, you're not playing for anything. I think I mentioned to Cheryl before the game, I think you're always playing for something when the scoreboard's up there. And the guy goes out and gets 20, and just plays like it's just another game, just loves to compete. So I love the opportunity with that. I love being around him. I love what he did for our young guys. I love what he did, for our team. He was great. But I think that's the biggest thing for me when Darnell was asking me the question. I'm not privy to the contractual situations or what the money looks like and all those kind of things going forward. And that's something I'll get educated on now that the season is over with. And to be honest with you, I haven't spent a lot of time on that myself personally. I trust, Arturis and Mark and his staff with that kind of stuff. But there's always that part of it, of trying to make the team better and improve the team. And then, what are the financial ramifications of that?
Just one more. You've obviously waxed poetic about him often this season, but can you summarize Zach LaVine's season and just kind of what it was like to coach him?
Yeah, I mean, Casey, the thing that was really, I was disappointed in, it was hard, when he got the COVID and we couldn't kind of, that 3 weeks, it would have been a great opportunity to see if our team could gel a little bit more. And it's unfortunate it didn't happen. Zach has been a great guy to work with. I think he and I have built a really good relationship. I really enjoy him as a person. I mean, his talent speaks for itself. People get a chance to see that every time he steps across the lines and plays, but he's even a better person. And I think he's trying to figure out the winning part. You know, he knows for a good portion of his career, you know, he's not won, or his whole career, he hasn't won, and he wants to do that. And these are things that, you know, he's going to have to take a deep dive into and a deep look at of how he can take another step. I did think he took a step this year. And I think that's coming from him. This is my first year being with him, but he felt like he got better, felt like he improved, felt like he learned a lot, you know, about the mental approach of things. But I do think it'd be, for all of us, it's just not good enough. Everybody needs to do more. Everybody, you know, and I don't say the players, I say our coaching staff, everybody needs to do more. It's just not enough.
Thanks, Billy.
Yep.
Kelly, go ahead.
Billy, how you doing?
Hey, Joe, how are you?
Good. Hey, kind of piggybacking off that aspect that Casey brought up about the partnership that you have with Arturas and Mark, and that's why I'll include you in this question and also ask them this question tomorrow. But when you guys made that trade for Vooch, that was a big swing that was taken by the organization simply because it seemed like the worst case scenario was if you don't make the playoffs this season, and you don't have a first round pick to show for it. And that's exactly what happened. So do you guys take that as a swing and a miss for this season? What was supposed to be the goal of that trade?
Yeah, you know what? I'm disappointed, Joe, that we didn't get to the postseason. I don't think it has anything to do with the trade. I would have felt disappointed if Vooch wasn't here, and the rest of these guys weren't here. Here's how I look at it. A third of our roster got turned over, okay? And with the roster being turned over, one of the things I think that was the challenging part was, you know, we didn't have a chance to work with each other. We didn't have a chance to practice. We threw this thing together. We went on a West Coast trip. I'm trying to figure out things on the fly of how the best way for our team to play. That's something I'm going to take a deep dive into myself personally, you know, other things I could have done differently or done better. But I think, Joe, the one thing that I've seen, and I haven't been in the NBA that long, when you look at these trades, most of the trades are trades to add, you know, and generally the trades are guys coming off the bench or filling a hole. This was I don't want to say a blockbuster trade, close to it, but this was a trade where immediately a guy comes in here and now he's unequivocally 1A or 1B right away. Those things don't normally happen in the NBA. You know, generally you look at some teams and they're trying to get better. They basically, hey, we got to get a backup this. We got to get an extra guy here. Hey, we need an extra shooter. And you kind of fill in. But when you talk about bringing in the caliber of player of Nikola, I mean, and then Daniel Tice, who's come from obviously a lot of winning in Boston, and also Javante, and then Troy, like the whole entire thing got kind of flipped upside down. And now you're left with a day of practice that these guys cannot participate in because you're taking a West Coast trip and they haven't cleared the medical aspect of it. And now all of a sudden you're going to Golden State, San Antonio, Phoenix, Utah, and you just keep, okay, what do we learn about this game? What do we learn about that game? So yes, it was hard to, you know, to make that kind of trade. And to your point, not get to postseason. But it was also a trade. I think if you go around and look at a lot of trades, how many of those kind of trades where a trade was made where a guy immediately elevated and was so good that you had to totally take advantage of his skill set. And in doing that, it obviously impacted a lot of other guys on the team. You know, and I got to look at that, Joe, personally. I'm just being honest. Was that the right thing to do? Was that really the right thing to do? I got so much respect for Vooch and his game and what he did, just seeing him in Orlando. And I got so much respect for Tice and Thad. You know, I'm just every day trying to figure out a way to kind of make all the pieces and parts work together, because you just don't want to get to a situation where he's saying, okay, hey, we're only going to play these 2 or 3 guys. These other guys are going to sit down, because a lot of times on our roster, there wasn't this great separation, you know, so all of a sudden, geez, we're not physical enough. Well, you got Tice sitting over there, put him in the game. Geez, you know, we need a little bit more shooting here. Hey, Put Larry in, he does that, So that was a thing that was unique. So I do think long-term, it's going to help us. I think in the short term, it was challenging. And, I'm not making any excuses for that. On the fly going through it, I really want to look at myself. I think the guys, from my perspective, did everything they could to try to make it work. There was no pouting, sulking. They were all trying to win. We were all trying to win. But you know what? As we started to play some games together, when Zach got the COVID, that really eliminated some of that partnership and chemistry for 3 weeks. And now all of a sudden we had to learn to play without Zach. And I'm not making excuses. That's our jobs. That's our jobs to do. Everybody's dealing with the same hand. And it's something that I think the guys, we all put our best foot forward, but we fell short. We just did. And I'm disappointed in that. And I'm not going to put anything on the players. I need to look at myself in terms of how or what I could have done differently to try to help in some way. I don't know what that is today, but that's something I'll take a deep dive on personally and look at myself in terms of, are there different things that we could have done offensively or defensively, and maybe there's not, Joe. Maybe it's just the fact that we didn't practice and it was just too hard. I just know since we had the trade deadline, we had 1 day of practice. And it was interesting. The 1 day of practice we went into a back-to-back with Charlotte and Boston, and we won both those games. I'm not saying it's because of practice, but I wish we had a little bit more time together, but we didn't. And that's something I've got to look at personally for myself of what are some ways I could have been better in that.
Thanks, Billy.
Yep, you're welcome.
Jamal, go ahead.
Yeah, Billy, I actually got a couple of questions for you, but kind of off that point you were making. Did you see things once Zach got back in that last stretch where you guys kind of played well before getting eliminated? Did you see things that kind of gave you confidence going forward, or things that you feel like, okay, we can use this and build on for this roster going forward?
Yeah, I think so, Jamal. I do. I'm obviously looking at it from a condensed situation, a condensed schedule, in playing a lot of games in a short period of time. And it's no excuse. It's just not. Everybody's dealt with the same hand. I've said it all year long. But I feel good about the character of people. I feel good about Zach as a person and his commitment to trying to figure out, how he can lead a team and lead an organization. Vooch has had some experience in the playoffs with Orlando. He's a great guy, totally open-minded to whatever he needed to do to help our group. It's unfortunate Troy couldn't be more of a part of it, because I thought he was actually doing a pretty good job before the ankle sprain. It was good that, Javonte kind of came in and, gave us a little bit of a spark there towards the end of the season. It was good to see him get some extra minutes. Tice gave us some good minutes, although he, went out and was dealing with that, hip issue. So I did, in small pieces, I saw a lot of positivity. It was just small pieces. It wasn't enough.
And then just coaching during you talked about it a little bit, obviously all season, and then a little bit even today, but just coaching during this season, when you have had a chance to reflect on it, anything that kind of stands out to you about how just the strangeness of the season, or something that you'll look back on to that stands out to you?
I always think that when you go through challenging situations, when you're going through it, it's challenging, right? But when you kind of go through it, I think you learn more about yourself. You learn more about teams. I think you get an opportunity to grow and improve. And, all of us as coaches and players, this is something that's been unprecedented that we hadn't gone through. Listen, if I would have been even more disappointed if I just say, hey, listen, our guys couldn't handle it. It was too overwhelming. It was too taxing. These guys were incredible. And I don't know if people really understand what all these players have had to go through just to get to the floor. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you think about, having to wear masks when they get off the court and all the other things. They've been remarkable. But I'm going to obviously going through a new experience, God forbid, I hope we don't go through this again. I hope we all can get back to normal. I'm not sitting there saying, but I hope there's some things that I really have learned that, I can get better at and improve upon going through something for the first time like this. It's just kind of the way I look at it. I look at it, every year. I've always been just a big believer of, what can you do better and how can you get better? That's kind of been always the way I've kind of viewed it and focused on it.
Thanks, Billy.
You're welcome.
Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, Billy, you, Arturas, Mark, basically everyone who was hired last offseason put an onus on player development coming in. Obviously, the organization makes hires subsequently to build out that department. How do you assess the process and the returns on the player development program after one season?
In terms of like, if you talk about individual players, maybe I can kind of maybe speak to that, or you're just talking about overall the totality of the player development piece?
Well, if you feel comfortable speaking to individual players, yeah.
Sure, I do. Yeah, I told you that yesterday. Once we got to the end of the season, I'd be happy to talk to you guys about anything.
Sure.
Is there anybody individual you want to talk about, Rob?
Well, I guess the rookie contract guys, I think specifically, are an interesting case just in the player development study. The Patricks, Lowry, Kobe. Just how do you think? What was the process that you guys implemented that was different than the organization was doing previously, and how do you think it played out for guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say that, Rob, just because the stuff that we would have implemented was almost impossible to implement because you were dealing with rest and recovery and games and how much can these guys actually physically do on the court. So a lot of it was film sessions, a lot of it was shooting. It wasn't necessarily a lot of really. I mean, these guys got on the court, don't get me wrong, but probably not at the level they normally would during a normal NBA season. So Patrick's a really good worker. Kobe's a great worker. But, there's also a point, too, with the number of minutes they're absorbing. You're taking that into consideration as you're working with a player. And sometimes, that can maybe get in the way of the development. I do think that that's got to continue to be a high priority for us because we have some really, really good young players. I give Dotson a lot of credit. It was great to see him perform the way he did because that kid has worked incredibly hard with zero opportunity to play in the G League other than the showcase that he played in. But we didn't have a G League team this year, and he just kept himself ready. And here he gets an opportunity last game of the year and really was a big boost for us today. I think it's going to be important that with Patrick, I'm looking forward to spending a lot of time with him this offseason because I really want to hear from him what he's learned, what he's experienced, and how he views the year. I think a lot of times when you're going and you're dealing with a younger player who's a rookie and you're trying to get him ready for what's getting ready to come, there's nothing like going through an experience yourself. I say this all the time. Guys would come into college or guys would come into the NBA and they do everything they can in the offseason to get themselves ready. And you know what? They're never ready. They have to go through it to learn. So this will be a big summer for Patrick. It'll be a big summer for Dotson. Be a big summer for a lot of guys. In terms of Kobe, in terms of their development, because Kobe, really it was up and down for him this year. But I've always said this about him: he's got great resolve, he's got great resiliency, he's got great bounce back ability. And I think after the trade was over with, I think he kind of found his footing and played really good basketball for us.
All right, Darnell, go ahead.
Yeah, Billy, I just wanted to thank you. I do have another question, but you've been nothing but professional with us despite these challenging circumstances. So I just wanted to say thanks for everything.
You're welcome, Darnell. Thank you.
My question is about this summer and the off season. A lot's been made about you guys, not just the Bulls, but every team not having a typical off season. And I know that you and Arturas and Mark, probably still putting your heads together and figuring this all out. But what will this offseason look like for this organization?
Yeah. So the first thing, Darnell, and I appreciate the words. The first thing will be tomorrow. I will meet with each player individually before they leave or head out. Obviously, some of them may just stay here in Chicago, but we're going to do meetings. We'll talk about the year. I'll give my thoughts. They'll give their thoughts, and we'll spend time talking. I always think after a season's over with, especially one like this, these guys need some time to decompress. They need a couple weeks to decompress. I certainly, more than anything, wish that we were figuring out who to prepare for, after tonight's game, but we're not. And I do think that, these players, just especially what they went through emotionally, mentally, physically, they've got to, and a lot of people haven't talked about the toll of the number of games and how many games they played in a short period of time. They need a few weeks before we even get into the off-season program. I think after I go through these meetings with these guys, I'm looking forward to taking some time myself to really look into this season. And I think I mentioned before the game, there's things I've done in terms of trying to keep notes and journal and log things that I really want to look at and go back without having a game tomorrow or the next day that you have to worry about, and can kind of take some time. And then I think Arturas and Mark and I will certainly sit down and talk. I think free agency is in the beginning of August. There's a lot of time. I do think, to make good, wise choices and to have good, robust conversations. I think it's better when the emotions of the season have somehow subsided and there's been some time and space that's passed by where you can go back and reflect and take some time and look at, what we all went through. I do think if we went right into that tomorrow or the next day, probably wouldn't be the healthiest situation, because it's been long for everybody. And I think everybody needs probably a little bit of time to decompress, regather, and then kind of hit it pretty good. But I do think the players, they need time just to get away and let their bodies heal, let their minds heal, get refreshed emotionally. And then, we can start into preparing and planning out, the offseason program for these guys.
Do you have a preference whether you like guys to stay here locally or they can go out and do their own thing? And will you and the staff build plans for them to work on as they go through this offseason?
Yeah, I think that's important. Obviously, Darnell, as it's a lot of it's up to, the players in terms of when the offseason comes, what we can and can't do. I think one of the biggest things is filling out Summer League, how we want to view Summer League, what do we want to do with Summer League, who will be the players participating in Summer League. I think those are going to be important conversations. I think if players, for whatever reason, feel comfortable about where they're working out or the environment that they're in, that they're comfortable in, I think myself and our staff traveling to those places to meet with those players and talk to those guys is important. I think, there's certain things I think for some of the younger players, we've got to kind of get them to continue to work on. But the other thing, like in fairness to Patrick, the way we were playing the first half of the season and when the trade deadline, it was totally different for Patrick. I mean, I can't even imagine what his head is like. And he's for 19 years old. I mean, he handled himself incredibly well. But the other thing you got to do too is figure out what your team's going to look at, like figure out how you're going to play offensively. Then you can kind of start to implement, things. Like I remember Zach called me when I got hired. And it was a great question. He said, Coach, do you have any idea what you're going to run on offense? I said, Zach, I just got hired. I got to watch a little bit of film. He said, well, I just want to know what I need to work on. That's the biggest thing I think players want to know is how we're going to play and what's the style you're going to play. So I can kind of focus on those things in the summer. And, we'll see what our team's going to look like. But there's certain things that I know that Zach has to do, that Vooch has to do, that Patrick has to do, that, Devon Dotson has to do, that all these guys have to do. There's just certain things they have to do. And then you can figure out, stylistically of how you're going to play later in the summer.
Thanks again, Billy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Darnell.
All right, Coach, that looks like it's our last question here.
Well, man, I just want to say this, to everybody. Obviously, I'm looking forward to hopefully getting the opportunity to meet everybody here sooner than later, face to face. And everybody, you guys were great to deal with, and I appreciate your patience during all this time, and just really, really enjoyed the conversations, your professionalism, and I'm just looking forward to getting a chance to see everybody face to face. So I just want to personally say thank you for everything this season.
Thanks, Billy. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Billy.
Yep.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank you, guys.
How do you spell Donovan?